right. Everybody ready? All right. Hello, guys. Hello. Huh? That's what I was looking for. Nope, that's just a container. Where'd my pointer go? Huh, my little pointer. Let's see if I set that down back here. Set down my little pointer. My laser pointer. Oh, I got it. All right, guys. So this over here, I had the live stream started over here, but this is what many believe, and I believe, this is a picture of the actual size of the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth of Jesus. So if you look at this, you see his head right there, and then his body's going down this way. This is his legs. These are his arms crossed, okay? So this is like a negative, like a photographic negative. So if you take, a guy took a picture like about 100 years ago, and when he saw the negative, it looked like this, and you can see the face of Jesus a lot clearer there, right? So that's the negative of this picture. And negatives didn't exist until like the 1890s or something like that. And we're going to hear more about that. But I'm going to explain some stuff on this PowerPoint. And let's see, I don't know if everybody can see the screen or not. You guys over there probably can't see it. Okay. Is that better? Can most everybody see this? Okay, so the shroud is a burial cloth of Jesus. Who wants to be, I need a volunteer. Anybody want to be a volunteer? Should we get Mr. Mark to be a volunteer? Because he's got a beard and Jesus has a beard, so that'll. Okay, so Mr. Mark, you're very able for a man of your age. Why don't you lay down here? Put your feet right here and just lay down. Okay, so this is how the burial cloth would have been for Jesus, see? They had this one big long piece of cloth, and then they would have laid it over his body like that, okay? That's how it would have been, all right? Isn't that cool? All right, that's good, Mr. Mark. All done? Yep, all done. So we have everybody? All right, so you see that, right? So there's Mr. Mark's head, and then he's laying down this way, and then you folded it over, like he was laying down on this side, and then they folded it over the top of him. Okay, so there's only like 16 slides, and I'll try and do this rather quickly because school's supposed to be over, what, in 20 minutes? Right? Yeah. Okay. So I tried to get my button to work, but it didn't. There we go. So the historical provenance. See that word, prove? That's trying to prove stuff. There's not a lot of proof in the early centuries, okay? So in history, it's tenuous. That means it's not really strong evidence. From Jerusalem to Liry, France, through the Crusader stronghold of Edessa. Not a lot of written down stuff that refers to the shroud there. But clear historical evidence after it gets to France in like the 1300s, okay? All right. So the pollen, I'm going to talk about the pollen record. Like little flowers and stuff, they like give out pollen, and like bees will fly around and they'll spread that pollen around and all that stuff. Then there's also evidence of Tiberian coins. When someone would die in the old days, your eyes would stay open, and they'd close your eyelids, and then you put coins over the top of your eyes to keep them from opening up again, okay? That was enough weight to keep them not from opening. And then, when was this shroud? When was it dated, okay? All right? And then there's this cool thing called the face cloth of Oviedo. So what happened was when Jesus died, he had a lot of blood and stuff. It was kind of weird, it's tad. And when they took him down from the cross, they wanted to make it safe. So, so people wouldn't get bled on and stuff like that. So they put this face cloth on him, tied his mouth shut, wrapped the face cloth around him. And that's what I'm talking about, the face cloth of Oviedo. And they have that in Spain. And they've had that for 1,400 years. So it's older than that, but they know where it's been for 1,400 years. All right, that's great. All right, so this is not a very big picture, but that's what Jesus, when in art, would look like in the first 300 or 400 years. He looks like a Roman guy, and he doesn't have a beard. But then what happened is they found this shroud in some reports in about the 500s. And then they started showing Jesus looking differently, more like this guy over here, okay? So it's kind of cool. So there seems to be a shift in what's called the iconography. That's the way they look at things, okay? That's the 4th century, and this is from the 6th century, that one over there, okay? Jesus now has a beard, and he's more Semitic looking. That means he looks more like a Jewish guy, and his appearance resembles the shroud image, okay? You can see how much more. See that shroud image over there? The one sitting in the chair? You got, right? Oh, you can't see it, kind of. There it is. See that? So that face looks a lot more like that face. Okay. There are some non-canonical, that means like not approved writings, that put the shroud in the hands of Peter or even Pontius Pilate in the early years. But you can't really trust those words, those records. There's a famous icon in Edessa, and it was found in the literature that coincides with the description of the shroud as early as 540 AD, so 1,500 years ago. Some of this information is taken from an article by this guy John Long, March 14, 2014, in what was called the Shiloh excavations. Edessa was a Crusader stronghold that fell in 1144 AD from the Crusaders. It's quite plausible how it made it into the hands of the French nobleman, this Geoffrey de Charny, through his relatives, okay? So that's how the shroud got over to Italy, because these Crusaders got kicked out of the Holy Land, and they took a lot of Holy Land relics and stuff with them, and this was believed to be one of them. Okay, so from there, the record is a lot more substantial, like we have a lot more written stuff after he gets over to France, all right? So it came into this guy's hands, this Geoffrey de Charny. The shroud appears in Liry, France, 1349. 1389, it goes on public display. It was found, but it was damaged in a fire. So, if you see those big patches, like those 2 triangle things that look like teeth, those were patches. So it got in a fire, and you can see how it was scorched and burnt, because this thing was folded up like a picture frame. If you look at this, you can see where the fold marks were, because they used to keep it in a picture frame, and that's what the face of Jesus was in that picture frame, and that's what they would claim what they would see in this place of Edessa. All right, so that's where those burn marks are, so they patched it. Okay. And then it found its way to St. John the Baptist. That's Giovanni Battista. That's how you say John the Baptist in Italian. And that was in 1578. Then they publicly showed it in 1931 on the 400th anniversary in Turin in 1978, and then in 1998, in 2000 and 2010. I actually was in Italy in 2000, so I actually saw the real one. This is just a picture of the real one, okay? This is the 1978 STIRP project, which is Shroud of Turin Research Project, all right? This group have set certain protocols. That just means the way you do stuff that were not followed in the 1988 carbon dating test. I can remember hearing about this test right when I was a new priest, or right when I was in engineering, actually, because I was in engineering in 1987, and I would have been in the seminary in 1988. And this carbon test said that the shroud was only from the Middle Ages, from the 1300s. But it was a bad test. They recommended, though, this research project to take 7 parts of the shroud, 7 different places where the shroud was undisturbed, and then go to 7 different labs across Europe and the United States. These were changed, though, and they took a piece of fabric from the same place and sent the same fabric, the same piece, to 3 different labs. It took them 15 years to get the data from that test because they wouldn't give it to them. They needed to do a Freedom of Information Act to get the data, and then they found out that the thread had cotton in it, which is the shroud's not made out of cotton, it's made out of linen, and it also had dye in it, which meant they took it from a part of the shroud that was repaired. And it was repaired in the Middle Ages after the fire. So you can see why the test was all messed up, I believe. Okay? All right. So the pollen record, this is what's really cool. This is from Father Spitzer's article on the science of the shroud. If you go to the Magi Center, M-I-G-I, from Magi, he's got great information on the shroud. This PowerPoint comes from this 33-page technical article that he wrote, and I tried to make it simpler. All right? 58 pollen grains were taken from the shroud. 45 of them came from Israel, from the sedimentary layer, the earth, from 2,000 years ago. So it's kind of cool. So that just dates the shroud right in the right time. All right? 6 grains from the Middle East, because the shroud made its way from Israel to the Middle East. And then also they found 2 grains from Edessa. That's where the Crusaders were, and they had it there for a while, they think. And then finally, the remaining 2 grains or 3 grains, whatever that works out to, came from France and Italy, where the shroud has been since the 1300s. All right, but you can see it's been in the Holy Land most of the time. That's why and it was out in the open, and they didn't care for it. It wasn't under glass. That's why there were so many of those shrouds, so many more pollen things from the Holy Land. These are the coins. Now these pictures, I have a better picture. The next slide is a better picture. These were identified like in 1931 and 1918 and 98, and they speculated them to be akin to what's called the widow's mite in the Bible, the little tiny coin. And it was there was one minted by Pontius Pilate in 29 AD. These pictures are taken from the Spitzer article. I think I have some better pictures. These are 2 scholars, and they said, you know, this is really a lot of evidence. We really believe that these coins are these ones that were minted by Pontius Pilate. So you can see this. It's not very clear, but you can see here, I don't know if you can't really see the laser pointer, but you can see how these are the letters that kind of match this coin that they have. There's only like 5 of these left, but you can see how the certain things match and they kind of line up there with different stuff, like the hook. You know, you see the hook. You know, you can kind of see the hook there. It's not real clear, but it's there. All right. So the face cloth of Olieta, I was telling you about this before. Okay, it was a face. So like when Jesus had that, they took it off and they laid it off to the side, because in John's gospel it says they had the burial cloth of Jesus, and then there was a cloth wrapped up right next to it laying there. So this is in the Bible. It's really cool. All right. It's called the Sudarium of Christi, the face cloth of Jesus. So we've known about this since 616 AD. There's no image on the cloth, but the blood and the fluids are still there, and they can even figure out what kind of blood type it is. Anybody know their blood type? I think I'm A negative, I think. All right? There's O blood. Jesus' blood, we believe, because of the Eucharistic miracles and stuff, that it all matches too. Jesus' blood type is AB positive. You know what's cool about AB positive? You know what's cool about blood that's O? If you have O blood, do you know what that means? Anybody can use your blood if you're an O. It's called the universal donor. So if you get sick, or if somebody gets sick and you have O blood, you can donate that blood, and anybody can take O blood, no matter what your blood type. If you're AB positive, you can take blood from anybody. So it's the universal receptor. Isn't that just like Jesus, to have the blood that receives everybody? Jesus takes us all. He receives anybody who comes to him. It's really, really cool. All right. So on that cloth, there's no blood stains. Or there's blood stains on the face cloth, but no image. But what's really cool is there's 120 points on that face cloth that match the blood stains on the other cloths. So that means that cloths touch the same face. So it's almost certain that really is the face cloth of whoever's in the shroud, which seems to be Jesus. Because you can see a lot of stuff in the shroud here, okay? You notice this big spot right there? That's like the blood that came out of his side when the soldier took the sword and put it in his side, and blood and water came out. The Bible says that. Okay, it's right there. See the blood marks going down, flowing down there? So that's the blood marks, okay? And then this throws a great doubt on the 1988 carbon date testing, okay? So this thing that matches that was from 616 AD, so, all right. Now, other methods of dating the shroud, this is what's really cool. The carbon-14 test was called into question because the sample they used had both dye and cotton fibers, which do not exist in the unmended portions of the shroud. Dr. Raymond Rogers and Dr. Giulio Fanti developed 4 new tests called the vanillin test, the Giulio Fanti's Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy test. I mean, that means a lot to you little guys, right? the Raman spectroscopy test for cellulose, and then this mechanical test for how easy it breaks. The older something gets, you know, it gets brittle, right? So it acts differently. All right? So when you look at this thing, the mean origin date of all these tests come out to be 33 AD, plus or minus 250 years. So it dates the shroud right at the time of Jesus. So it's very cool. Okay, the image. There's no pigment or scorching. So what you see there is not pigment or paint or anything like that. What happens is, if a really bright light hits it, it'll like take a little bit of the water right out of the surface of the fragments, and it dries out and it looks a different color. So the sun shines a little differently, and it looks like a different color because there's less water in that very top part of the fabric, all right? So there's no scorching either. So the image is like a photographic negative, which would be highly improbable that a forger, somebody making up this thing, could do it in the 1300s, as that test says, because photographs were only produced in the 19th century. That's 300 years later. So they didn't even know what a negative was, so it's crazy. It's kind of weird, you know? All right, so the effect can be reproduced by vacuum ultraviolet radiations that this guy speculates, John Jackson. It addresses 3 of the 5 kind of weird things about the shroud. Those are called enigmas, you know, very strange things. The fibers are only affected on just the very outside of like a little thread. And the image is uniform, even when it's not touching the body. So even though the body wasn't touching it, it still took that moisture out of those things, which give it this 3D effect. This could produce a photographic type image on the shroud. It's kind of really cool. So, 2 other mysteries. How the bones are visible in the hands in the encased flesh. If you look really carefully there, you go up and look at it, you can see like his finger bones right in there. If you look a little closer. So that's kind of a weird thing. And then there's also a double image on the shroud. So on this side of the shroud, where his head was, you know how Mr. Mark was laying down there? His face was on there, but it seemed as though like the shroud must have passed through his body, because there's an image on the other side of that part of the shroud. So in other words, light would have hit both sides of that shroud somehow mysteriously. So the body becomes like mechanically transparent. It's like weird, all right, like super weird. So the clear side of it is touching the body. That was a clear image, but on the other side there's a finger image, and that's the side most distant from the body. There's nothing in between the 2 sides, so it just hits the outer and inner layers of that shroud. It's really, really weird. So his hypothesis suggests that the body of Jesus became mechanically transparent, so that the shroud like passed through Jesus' body. As like every cell in Jesus' body just burst forth this ton of light. It's really cool. Okay, so in 2010, 6 physicists from the research centers were able to confirm the possibility of Jackson's hypothesis, okay? This was done with UV light emitted by an ARF excimer laser. One need not get a laser to do this, but you need a lot of light, an incredible amount of light energy to get this level of UV light radiation. The exposure would be only 1/40 billionth of a second, with an intensity of several billion watts of ultraviolet light. So you need like 500,000 searchlights that flashed this image in 1/40 billionth of a second, because that much energy would just like destroy the cloth. Isn't that cool? The blood types on both those cloths match. They're both AB positive. And it's also the type of blood that we find in the Eucharistic miracles when like, mysteriously the host starts to bleed. It's like miracle of Lanciano, all these kind of cool, weird things. 120 points of coincidence from the stains of the shroud and the face cloth of Oviedo. And the blood type on the shroud seems to block the effects of the image, which apparently is not under the blood stains. Really cool stuff. All right? In conclusion, in my own opinion, in my own mind, it takes more faith to believe that the shroud is a medieval forgery than an authentic burial cloth of Jesus, okay? My faith, though, is not based on such miracles, but rather on the testimony of the early Christians who willingly gave up their lives because of what they saw and believed. May our faith be strengthened by God's powerful interventions in history, and may we be the living stones which we're called to be, for we will rise and be like him. Isn't that cool? We get to rise from the dead if we put our faith in Jesus. Because you guys all know who you are, right? And infinitely one-of-a-kind masterpiece created by God for a mission. And guys, what will happen if we pursue perfection? And why do we want to achieve excellence? Cool. Any questions?
Actually, we have something that we wanted to recognize for you, and it was so fitting that you ended that way. So we wanted to, while we're all gathered here together, we wanted to be able to thank you for everything that you have done for the parish and for the school, and show some thanks, and also take a little bit of us with you when you leave in June. So Mrs. Steve has a gift for you.
Well, thank you very much. All right.
But we wanted to do that for you.
Guys, thank you so much. You know,
After we get done, I show you what it is, and we'll do our quick class list for everybody and get special recognition.
all right. Cool. You are an infinitely valuable, one-of-a-kind masterpiece for everybody got for a mission. Cool. That's great. Awesome.
Ladies and gentlemen, quick class list, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Welcome to everything that you have done for us.
Hey guys, just know this. I didn't ask to get moved. I really didn't. The bishop asked me to go to another school, and so I'm going to miss you guys tremendously. But you know what? God is perfect in his memory. He knows all you guys, and I am heaven. I'm responsible for you guys' soul, right? And you know, I'm a little older, so hopefully I'll live a good life and get to go to God before you guys and get to go to heaven, which would be very cool. But if you guys aren't living a good, holy life, God can keep track of all you guys, and I'm going to ask God's permission to come back and haunt you and try and scare you into being good and holy. Because God always sees us, so we always want to try and do the right thing. You know, treat each other with great respect and love, okay? The computer system got messed up because I think somebody planted a virus, and that made me really sad in our computer. But it's all fixed now, so just pray for whoever did that. You know, we need to pray for people who do mean things. Instead of letting that anger cause us to be mad and hold a grudge, when someone is mean to you and they don't treat you with respect, pray for that person. Pray for that person, okay? Because that's how the world's going to be a better place. I also recorded this, so it's on YouTube, so you can pull it up. And if you want to show your friends this presentation, you should be able to do it. It's on the Facebook page for St. John the Baptist School, St. John the Baptist Church, and also it's on my YouTube channel. Okay? All right? The Lord be with you. Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Wasn't this cool? Yes. All right, guys. God bless.